Sally has enjoyed entrepreneurial success since starting her first company at the age of 28. She has been honored with numerous awards, including Women Entrepreneur of the Year and the Top 25 Women Making Business History. Sally believes that age does not define us. We define how we age, and I think everybody on this call would probably agree. So thank you, Sally, for joining us today. Thank you all for joining us today, and I will let Sally take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen. And let's make sure we've started the recording so that people have this if they want to refer to it. So I am so delighted to be here. And that was a great professional introduction. I tell people that I'm in my third act because how many people go back to graduate school at age 67? But I did. But I'm also excited on a personal level to be with you because Chicago it's just a place that's near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Oak Park. I went to Oak Park River Forest High School, and I still have a twin sister who lives in the Chicago area. She lives in Wheaton. I usually visit her 5 times a year. It's been a little bit slower, less so this year, but I'm hoping to get back soon. So I think today's topic is really timely. We are going to talk about a healthy immune system. And my goal between now and 3 p.m. is to help you separate fact from fiction, because there's a lot of fiction out there. I'm going to talk about some areas of emerging science, so what we're starting to learn. And my hope is that you learn one new concept, something that you go back and you say, oh yeah, that was interesting. I didn't know that, and maybe I can apply that. And as Karen mentioned, we're going to stop about 10 minutes before the hour to take questions. So as we go, if you're curious about something, just type it into the chat window. All right. So in order to present this, I did extensive research. I did a systematic review of literature, probably 30 different sources, but I also wanted to ensure that my content was really based on fact. So I consulted 2 experts. One is Ed Schneider. He's an MD. He's out of the University of Southern California, and he's a professor of gerontology, medicine, and biology. My other resource is just a great person, Toby Schmidt. She's a PhD out of Stanford. She is an immunologist and microbiologist. So they were kind of the deciding vote as I did this research. In order to know if we can boost the immune system, it's really important to know what the immune system is. So let me just give you about a 5-minute introduction. So it really is a system, and it's a highly complex system. It's organs, it's cells, it's chemicals that fight microbes. And again, there's not a quiz on this, but you can see how many different organs and body parts are involved. In fact, even at a basic level, the skin could be considered part of the immune system because it keeps a lot of microbes out. In addition to what I just showed you, there are white blood cells. And there's actually 17 different kinds of white blood cells. These 8, I call them a few of my favorite, but actually they're the 8 that are the most well-known. And what's interesting is that they all have very, very different functions. So on a daily basis, behind the scenes, without us even knowing it, our immune system is doing battle. It fights against viruses, bad bacteria, parasites, and fungi. And you may be curious why I put bad bacteria in there, because you actually have about 2 to 3 pounds of good bacteria in your gut. So not all bacteria is bad. Now, there are age-related changes in the immune system. Some of this we can prevent through lifestyle choices, some of it we can't. What could go wrong? Well, pretty much anything can go wrong with the immune system, and it has a fancy name. It's called immunosenescence, and it's basically an age-related decline. So things can go wrong with, for example, the bone marrow or the endocrine system or, any of our organs. things can go wrong with the white blood cells. In particular, there's decline in the B and T cells. In addition to all of this, there's something known as inflammaging. And what that is chronic low-level inflammation. I think of it as a good thing gone awry. So the immune system is a very positive thing. We absolutely need it for our health, but you can have too much of a good thing. And when that happens, this chronic low-level inflammation starts setting in, and it actually compromises the whole system. So that's just a quick introduction. And given that things change and decline as we get older, and given the fact that, oh yes, we are still in the midst of a pandemic, this is a really logical question. Can you boost your immune system? Now, on this note, I have bad news and good news. So let me share the bad news first. Dr. Schneider said, no, you cannot boost your immune system. So then, of course, I went to Dr. Schmidt and I said, oh, come on. She also said no, but she gave me a very, very helpful clarification. She said, first of all, what do you even mean by boost the immune system? She said, part of the problem with that is it's the bad choice of words. Because if you're thinking about boosting the immune system, what does that mean? Does that mean that you have more white blood cells, like those ones I showed you before? She's like, that's very, very bad, Sally. That's an autoimmune disorder. So that's not good. And then she said the second thing is that viruses and bacteria adapt. They're actually very, very smart. They've been around longer than we have. So she said, stop thinking about boosting your immune system. You know, she said that word means like, you know, what does that mean? Like we could help the immune system do its job. It doesn't need that. But think instead about what lifestyle practices you can follow to support your immune system. So, okay, I thought that was a good clarification. And maybe a little bit of it is semantics. But there's so much misinformation out there in the blogosphere. So this was a really interesting analysis that was done in 2019. It's a meta-analysis, so an analysis of lots and lots of data. And these researchers did a search on the words boost immune system in Google. They actually came up with 185 web pages of data. And all of these, everything from diet to honey to seafood to where's mushrooms in here? Mushrooms is around, there's mushrooms, are said to boost your immune system. And you notice I'm using air quotes around it because really there's only one of these that would truly boost your immune system, and that's vaccines. And it comes in the blogosphere, it comes after mushrooms, it comes after soup. So what I want to do in our time today is go over what some of the common beliefs are about the immune system and things that can support it. And I want to help separate fact from fiction. So that's what we're going to do. And we're going to have some fun doing it because, as Karen said, I'm going to share some polls. So you can see these are all these different topics we're going to talk about. But let's start with vitamin C. So, true or false, drinking orange juice or taking vitamin C tablets is a good way to support the immune system if you feel a cold coming on. And give me a second here, I'm going to share a poll. And in a second, you should see a poll come up on your screen, and you should be able to vote either true or false. And I'm seeing answers coming in. By the way, there's no prizes. In some of these, you're going to see that there's no really wrong answer because the evidence is mixed. So far, I have 8 votes. I'm going to take a few more seconds. This is good. I like that we have a combination of true and false. Let's take about 10 more seconds to vote. All right, it looks like the voting has stopped. And let me share the results. So 82% of you said yes, and 18% said no. So here's what the data says. It's mostly false. This idea of vitamin C boosting the immune system has been researched for 70 years. The data has been around for a long time, and it's something we really, really believe. In fact, 50% of the web pages that I mentioned touted vitamin C to boost immunity. But if you really look at the data, and that's where I tried to, what I tried to do is do look at more of these meta-analysis. 29 clinical trials, over 11,000 people. What the finding was that there was no real effect on the incidence or severity of colds in the general population. Now, with that said, extreme athletes, marathon runners, downhill skiers, like they did better in some of these some of these trials. So that's why I'm saying mostly false. And then the data in therapeutic trials is mixed. So what happens is that there may be a clinical trial in a laboratory, but when physicians are actually trying to do a therapeutic trial to see, okay, if we test this on real patients, what happens? The result is mixed. So there's a common belief about vitamin C, but it's not necessarily supported by the evidence. And I find that part of our concern about vitamin C is that we just worry in general about getting enough vitamins. So I wanted to dispel a little bit of a myth there. So you've probably heard of the RDAs, and a lot of us think of that as the recommended daily allowance. It's actually the recommended dietary allowance. It's created by the USDA. New guidelines come out every 5 years. And the RDA is set really, really high for people. So if you look at, for example, a bottle of 1-a-days or vitamin C and you see the RDA, that's 2 standard deviations higher than what most people need. So it's not that you need to get that much every day. Only a small percent of the population, maybe 2.5%, actually need that much. Yet we get kind of fixated about getting enough vitamins. And in fact, in this country, almost no one is vitamin deficient, but we do have cases where people go to the hospital because of vitamin toxicity or because of interaction with other drugs they're taking. So what is true, and I really, really want to stress this, it's good nutrition. Eating a healthy, balanced diet day in and day out is what really helps support the immune system. And I think this first one is very key. It's this variety of fruits and vegetables on a regular basis. Because you see, vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant, but there are dozens. And the more variety that you get in your food, the more protection you have, not just for the immune system, but also the effects of cellular aging. And then I looked at guidelines from these 4 different groups, and they can all agree on all of these. So it's the whole foods versus the processed foods. And these kinds of things, but in moderation, small amounts. So that is true. Now, let's go on to another one. Exercise in the immune system. Let's see what our question is. True or false? Moderate exercises reduces the risk of upper respiratory tract infection. Let me go ahead and start a poll here. So you should see the poll, true or false. And this one is moderate exercise reduces the risk of upper respiratory tract infection. And I see people are voting. All right, so I have 9 votes. Let me give it one or 2 more seconds. And I will end the poll and I'll share the results. So most of you felt this was true. One person false. And this one's interesting because it's true. In fact, exercise is probably the most important thing that you can do for your health at any age. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to start. But here's some interesting research, and you can see that there's a lot of research, a lot of data in this area. Is what researchers looked at was the increase in protection against upper respiratory tract infections from exercise. And what they found was just in this area of moderate exercise, there was a big increase, 2 to 6 times less likely to get an upper respiratory tract infection if you did moderate exercise on a regular basis. So that's pretty compelling. And, you know, I'm always interested in the physiology behind how something works. I think that's a good question for you guys to ask. It's like, well, how does it work? So here's what happens with moderate exercise is that it improves immunosurveillance. And what that is the ability of those white blood cells to detect invaders. So that's very, very positive. And it also reduces chronic inflammation. Remember, that's a side effect of aging. So both of those are very, very powerful. And the results weren't that different with high exercise. In fact, too much exercise can, in fact, compromise the immune system. And when I say too much, I'm talking about a lot. I don't think any of us on this call are in danger of it, but it's just good to know that exercise has a really positive benefit. So how much is enough? All right, so these are the guidelines of the American Heart Association. And so it's that moderate walking, brisk walking, 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day. That's great. That's a great place to start. Combining it with strength training a couple times a week. And then, one we forget about is balance and flexibility. So some type of yoga, tai chi, stretching, all of those are going to be very important for our health and for our immune system. All right, I love talking about stress, and I just love this picture. Okay, so let's look at stress. And here's another true-false question. True or false, chronic stress has a negative effect on the immune system? Let's share a poll. And then go ahead and vote. What do you think, true or false? Chronic stress has a negative effect on the immune system. Oh, I see a lot of true answers. People are pretty much in agreement here. And it looks like 10 of you have voted. And the results, everybody said true, which is correct. Let's look at it in a little more detail. So again, why is it correct? Well, there's this emerging field called psychoneuroimmunology. And again, like I said, there's no test on all these words, but it's a growing field of research. It's absolutely fascinating. And it's looking at the link between changes in the endocrine system and how things like stress affect that. And the endocrine system, of course, is a very key part of the immune system. So this research was published in 2004. It was a meta-analysis of over 300 articles. I mean, that is a very, very major study. And what the research showed was that there was a negative effect on almost all functional measures of the immune system. And the people that were most susceptible to stress are older adults or less healthy adults. So it might be somebody in their 40s or early 50s but they may have COPD, which is a lung disorder, or diabetes, or metabolic disorder, or also older adults. So in fact, the same people that are the most susceptible to COVID are also the people that are most susceptible to compromises in the immune system because of stress. Now, there are other implications, and I do want to stress that I'm talking stress, no pun intended, I'm talking about chronic stress. I'm not talking about you see a car accident, there's an emergency, you call 911. I'm talking about the day in and day out of things like the pandemic, or not being able to see friends and relatives, or a change in your job situation. It's that kind of chronic stress that actually is linked to these kinds of challenges. So chronic stress, you're going to be more susceptible to infectious disease. Even wound healing is going to happen at a slower rate. This third one is a big concern because vaccines, whether it's for pneumonia or COVID or whatever, are not going to work as well. And then finally, reactivation of latent viruses. You may have heard of something called shingles. It's actually, if you've had chickenpox as a child, that virus never leaves, and stress can reactivate it and cause a very painful disorder called shingles. So stress is tough. Now, I would say in the last maybe 10 to 15 years, maybe more, but there's a new kind of an emerging area of research that psychologists talk about, and they say, don't just try to alter your thoughts. If I tell all of you on this call, oh, don't be stressful, don't stress about the pandemic, don't stress about getting on a plane. I mean, it's not like it's a light switch that you can turn on and off. We can't do that. So instead of trying to simply alter our thoughts, the idea is to develop a greater awareness of them. And this is the practice of mindfulness. And I'm sure you've heard of it. Some of you might practice it, but it's this idea of developing an awareness of our thoughts so that then we can reframe them. I can't go into an entire mindfulness class here, but I am going to give you an experiment that you can try later today. And if you like it, you could try it again tomorrow, and you might find that it becomes a new habit. I call it the 1 minute of mindfulness, where you simply sit in a chair and breathe. The instructions are here on the left, but it's really no more complex than that. You don't need to do some magic yoga pose or twist yourself up like a pretzel. You just simply sit and breathe. And if your mind wanders, which it will, just focus again on your breathing. So I can send you many more resources about mindfulness, but this is just a little experiment to try, and it's a great place to start. Okay, feelings. How about feelings? Do they support the immune system? Well, let's take a look at the question. True or false? Emotions such as happiness, sadness, and loneliness have an effect on the immune system. All right, you know the drill now. Let's relaunch this poll. And go ahead and indicate if you think it's true or false. Happiness, sadness, and loneliness have an effect on the immune system. Oh, this is interesting because everybody is voting on this one. I think we had 100% of the people who voted. 100% of you said yes. And this is interesting. I was so skeptical about this. I would have said no if I had been taking this, this little quiz. I was like, how could that work? I mean, how could that work? And so what Toby said is maybe. This is truly an emerging area of research, Because she said, you know, Sally, measuring the effect of feelings on the immune system is part of PNI. I explained that term earlier. So just like we use PNI to measure the effect of stress on the immune system, you can use that to measure feelings. Feelings are harder, however, because with stress, we actually can measure levels of cortisol. You don't have those same biomarkers. But Toby went on to say, happiness and other states of being influence physiology through the endocrine and nervous systems, and both interact with the immune system. So all of you who said true, which was everybody on the call, you are onto something which is really an emerging area of science. I find it incredibly exciting. Not that you need to look these two researchers up, but I wanted to share, you know, kind of highlights of what's happening across the pond in the UK, what's happening right here in my own state of California, down in UCLA. You know, these two PhDs are doing extensive work in this area of PNI. So stay tuned, you'll probably be hearing more about it in the near future. All right, how about sleep? Let's take a look at sleep. True or false? Lack of sleep influences how likely you are to get sick from a virus and how severe the symptoms will be. Let's see what you think. So go ahead and answer the poll. This one is lack of sleep influences how likely you are to get sick from a virus and how severe the symptoms will be. 9 people have voted. I have 10 results. I'm waiting for a couple more. Anyone else want to vote? All right, well, 10 of you said true. And you know what? It is so true. It is unequivocally true. People who get less than 7 or 8 hours of sleep per night have a lot of challenges. So first of all, if you are one of those folks, you're going to have greater susceptibility to a common cold. You are also going to have more symptoms, and you run the risk of having an increase in other types of infectious disease. So your cold is more likely, for example, to turn into pneumonia. So those are all very, very concerning. Now, again, I always want to understand what is the physiology. Don't tell me something is good for me without explaining how it's going to work. So this is pretty interesting. So earlier, I mentioned T cells and B cells, and I said that those were 2 types of white blood cells that tend to become more compromised as we get older. So what sleep does is it basically makes these T cells stickier. So for viruses to work, first of all, when they come into a host like us, they have to stick to something. And then in order to attack them, whatever that attacking white blood cell is, it has to stick as well. So stickiness is important. And what sleep does is it helps make the T cells stickier, and it helps then to destroy the pathogen. In addition, lack of sleep decreases cytokines, and these are proteins that activate an immune response. So you may have heard about cytokines. They've been in the news a little bit. I'm going to come back to why they've been in the news. But you know, your body has to mount an immune response. So some white blood cells will say, hey, hello, here's somebody who just sprained their ankle. Hello, I need some help. Other blood cells come to the rescue. But the way they come to the rescue is that the cytokines need to activate that immune response. And so if you don't get enough sleep, your body has a decrease in cytokines. The flip side, cytokines can go awry. That's called a cytokine storm when they overdo it. And that's something you may have heard about with respect to COVID. So that's one of the things that they've been studying. So how much do you really need? I get asked this again and again. Some people think they're part of the sleepless elite and they only need 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. That's 1 in 20,000 people. You're more likely to get hit by lightning than you are to be one of the sleepless elite. The research shows 7 to 8 hours per night. And this is new research. It was actually just published in 2015 by the National Sleep Foundation. And they even added a new category for adults 65 and older. It's 7 to 8 hours a night. Okay, I saved the best for last. I talk about, oh, this is my favorite, that's my favorite. I love this topic of supplements. So we're going to have some fun with supplements here. So here's a popular supplement. In fact, way back, that Google study I showed you, that Google meta-analysis, it was rated as better than vaccines for boosting the immune system. But true or false, taking echinacea when you feel a cold coming on will help reduce the symptoms. So let's look at the poll. And is that true or false? Ah, this is great. We're getting some mixed answers here. I love it. So I have 10 responses. Does anybody else want to vote? So let me show you your results. This is mixed, and I would say that this mixture actually represents the research. So this one is interesting. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to call this one mostly false. And here's the evidence behind that. So New England Journal of Medicine, highly respected publication, in 2005 did a study. They found no evidence that echinacea had any effect on the common cold. Another study was done in 2010. It was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine, again, highly respected. They didn't show any difference between echinacea and a placebo in terms of either severity or duration. Then a Cochrane report came out, and you may be familiar with Cochrane. It's a highly regarded research institution. They are known for doing very large-scale meta-analysis studies. So in 2014, they did a review of 24 controlled clinical trials. That's a big study. They found small preventative effects. And then another study, this was published in Advances in Therapy, and this one just kind of cracks me up because it was so different. It was 6 clinical trials, but it said echinacea reduces the risk for colds by 35%. So what in the world is going on? Well, what we see and what Professor Ed Schneider, MD, confirmed for me is that supplements work for about 10 to 20% of people. And if you're wondering who this handsome guy is on the left, that is my husband, who swears by echinacea. In fact, he has many, many bottles of it. So understand that with supplements, and that's as true like whether it's something like echinacea or glucosamine for arthritis, it may work for you. You may be part of that population. And if it works, then fine, take it. If it doesn't work, don't waste your money. And also, you need to be aware that there is a dark side with supplements. So again, you may have heard this, they are not regulated by the FDA. They can have anything in them. You don't really know if it's 100% echinacea or what is in that bottle. They may also have adverse drug interactions. Let me give you an example. Some of you are probably familiar with Coumadin. It's also called warfarin as a generic, but it's for, it's basically people take it as a blood thinner. So if you've had open heart surgery, if you have other trouble with arrhythmia, you might be on Coumadin. And it has a very, very narrow therapeutic window. If you're on Coumadin, you have to have your blood tested every couple of weeks to make sure they get the dosage right. Guess what? If you start to take echinacea, it throws the dosage off. And so now, all of a sudden, a very critical medicine for your health is no longer going to be as effective because you're taking a supplement that you may or may not have told your doctor about. So I just encourage people to be cautious about supplements. Make sure to tell your doctor about all of them. And then there are a couple of independent bodies, the National Science Foundation and one called UPS, that will help regulate supplements. So the supplement companies can actually put themselves through an additional rigorous test. And I would look for those labels on your supplements. Now, this next one, Karen hasn't even seen these slides because I just added it. And I added it because the last time I gave this presentation, somebody asked me about coldies. And their question was so good, I decided we should look at that. So coldies, which has been around for 30 years, true or false, will reduce the duration of a cold. And before you answer, I'm going to show you the packaging. It says it's clinically proven to reduce the duration. And if you look at the fine print on the back, where I needed not only my glasses, but a magnifying glass, or you go to their website, it says this. It says it's been clinically proven to shorten it by half, almost half. And then it says that it's backed by double-blind, placebo-controlled studies conducted at the Cleveland Clinic and Dartmouth College. So that's what they publicize. And now I'm going to ask you, is it true or false? So this is our last quiz question. I see mixed answers, which I love. Some true, some false. I got 9, I've got 10 answers, and now it's very mixed. Let me share the results. So true, slightly ahead of false. And what I will tell you is that your answers pretty much match the research. So I'm giving it a maybe. Now, if I only looked at the data that coldies refers to, I would say no, because these studies were so small. So the studies that they refer to, Dartmouth, was done in 1992 with 73 young adults, so not even people our age. The Cleveland Clinic was done in 1996, 100 employees. And what's kind of funny is that everybody who was in the study already had a cold when the study took place. Even though coldies is advertised as take it when you first feel the symptoms of a cold, everybody had a cold. So I just could not consider that credible data. But I got curious about this because the key ingredient in coldies is zinc gluconate glycine, and it's basically zinc. So what about zinc? If we kind of put coldies aside, what about zinc? So a word about zinc is that zinc as a food, as a micronutrient, as something you eat, is extremely important for your immune system. It's a trace mineral. It's in lots of foods. I gave you a few here. It's in meat. It's in seafood. If you're a vegan or vegetarian, it's in soy. It's nuts, beans, seeds. It's in a lot of foods. But if you are deficient in zinc, you know, a severe deficiency is linked to a severe immune dysfunction. Now, almost nobody in the United States has a zinc deficiency. However, about 20% of people over 60 may not be getting enough, mostly because their diets aren't varied enough. If you eat a variety of foods, you've got it covered. But that's not really the promise. The promise is these kinds of supplements. And it's like, does taking a supplement like zinc, does that reduce cold symptoms and decrease the duration of a cold? So it's similar to what I asked before, but we're going to do one more poll. I said that was the last one, but let's play one more. So what do you think about zinc? True or false? I see people voting. All right, interesting results here. One person's holding out. I've had 10 so far, but I'll share. So it's mixed. And I'm going to say maybe. Again, the data from 92 and 96, that was about zinc, but it's dated and it's small. But in 2004, there was a meta-analysis of more than 30 clinical trials. So it looked at publications between 1980 and 2003. And it's kind of mixed results. So here's the thing. Some of the studies said yes, some of them said no. But the challenge with it is that the studies weren't done very well. So the study design was a little bit sloppy. The blinding was sloppy. So, if I'm giving you a supplement and you know it's zinc, you're going to probably say, yes, it's helping me, more so than if you didn't know if it was zinc or a placebo. And even the lozenge contents, like there was such a vast variety of the dosage and, like how much zinc you were getting, that it's really hard to tell. But this to me was the most compelling part of all of this research, is that there's a physiological reason why it might work. And what appears to happen is that if you take zinc, again, when you first start to get a cold, that virus, that rhinovirus, has a harder time attaching. So if it can't attach to something, another cell in your body, then it's going to be less likely to spread. So I would say maybe. I would say if you take zinc and it works, take it. If you've never tried zinc, I never have for a cold, I would be willing to try it. But here's the guidelines. Take it as directed, because anything you take, if you take too much of it, there can be an adverse effect. And then again, from all of the data I've gone through, it appears that it's most effective as you first start to have those symptoms. Okay, so I am going to summarize kind of what I consider to be the key takeaways, and then we have 10 minutes left for questions. These are things that you can do to support your immune system. These are proven. So it's nutrition, it's good nutrition, it's a variety of foods and whole foods. It's exercise. It's not extreme exercise, it's moderate exercise on a regular basis. It's sleep, 7 to 8 hours a night. And it's how you handle stress. Stress isn't what really gets to us, it's how we perceive it. And if we have the ability to reframe it, it has a much more positive effect on our overall health. Now, interestingly enough, these kinds of lifestyle habits are also ones that protect against chronic disease. So these protect us against diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and there it is again, chronic inflammation. Interestingly enough, within the pandemic, with COVID-19, people who have these kinds of conditions are a lot more susceptible to that virus, even if they are not an older adult. So in general, these kinds of lifestyle choices are going to keep us healthier, help us age better, and also support the immune system. And those are my key points. I just hope you guys are really curious. I haven't seen people putting questions in the chat, but I'd encourage you to do it now. So just if you have questions, type them in, or if you really want, you can unmute and just ask me a question.
Oh, excuse me.
Bless you. Is there something you're curious about?
On your slide about exercise,
Yes.
you had aerobic 150 minutes a week, strength 2 times a week, but was there a time of it? I mean, is it 2 times for 30 minutes?
That's such a good question. And the guideline itself is pretty broad. I would say 30 minutes is good. Twice a week, 30 minutes is fine. If you can do more, great. But part of the reason that strength training is so important is it helps you continue to protect your lean muscle mass. And that is important just for your overall metabolism, and it's important for functional movement.
And I have the same question for the strength, balance, and yoga portion.
Yeah, I would say they suggest 3 times a week. I would suggest at least 30 minutes of that. But you know what I also find is sometimes people don't have 30 minutes, but they'll do 10 minutes of yoga or 15 minutes of yoga, or they'll practice balancing on one foot. So if you can work it in as part of an exercise routine, great, but also just look for kind of opportunities on a daily basis to get some of those things in.
And
Thank
Sally,
you.
I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyways. What if you split it up throughout the day? What if you did 10 minutes here and then 10 minutes there and then 10 minutes later?
I think it's great. I mean, you are an expert in exercise.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. Yeah. The best exercise is the exercise you actually do, you know?
And yes, it is. Yes.
I want more questions. What other questions?
So let's say you've got allergies and then there's a cold that comes along. Are you more susceptible to that cold if you're dealing with your allergy situation? Or let's say maybe you're injured or something like that. Are you more susceptible if you've got something else going on with your body? Not necessarily one of the,
Right.
diabetes or one of those that you pointed out earlier.
Right. I'm going to give you an answer that I believe that is true. I have not specifically studied allergies, but your body, you think about your immune system, you only have so many defenses. You have a lot. But if they are busy doing something else, they're going to be less likely and less able to do what they need to do. So we know that's true, for example, if you don't get enough sleep. So it's logical to assume that an injury or an allergy might have the same effect. I'm going to specifically look up allergies. I haven't researched it.
I just gave you more work, sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. That's how we got on Coldies and Zing.
Yeah.
How about other questions? I saw Hank, you came on mute. Did you have a question?
Yeah, with regard, well, a couple of things. One, fairly easy. When you're talking about recording this talk, is that going to be available to us? Because I
Yes.
know someone in the house I live in who could benefit a great deal from hearing the talk. So that's one thing. So you're saying yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then more into the nitty gritty of it. When you're talking about RDA, are you saying it's not necessary or maybe not even a good idea to take daily vitamins daily?
Hank, you asked a great question. Okay. So let me be careful how I answer this.
Yeah.
If you are eating a good balanced diet, vitamins are probably unnecessary because you're getting those nutrients from foods, and most nutritionists will tell you that you're going to be much more likely to absorb the nutrients from food than from supplements. And there's really fascinating studies. There's a big one that came out of, let me just think here for a second. It's the Tufts School of Nutrition on the East Coast that was showing that for like 26,000 people, the vitamins were not actually being absorbed like they were in food. You know, it just didn't have as much effect. What I can't say for sure is without looking at your actual diet, like how much of the nutrients you're getting. And so I know a lot of people take like a 1 a day or some kind of supplement to hedge their bets. The counterpoint, it sounds good, but the counterpoint to that is I'd rather have people do a better job of eating a variety of foods because you're more likely to get the nutrients you need. One last thing is that I do know some people who take supplements don't do it every day. I mean, an example is vitamin D. For the most part, you don't get it in food, you get it from sunlight, but some people really, really protect themselves from sunlight, and so they may have a deficiency. That's a fat-soluble vitamin. It stays in your body. You don't need it every day. And most people, when they go on a vitamin D supplement, they take it way too long, and then it builds up in the body. And they only need it for a short period. So it's a great question. Great question.
It looks like maybe Becky has a question.
Becky had her hand raised.
Thank you very much. It was very informative. Do you recommend that we get these studies from gerontologists and people that are dealing with people in our age group?
Another great question. So I would say yes, and let me give you the reason. Gerontologists have a very unique perspective on the science of aging. I went to Stanford and I got a degree, a certificate in nutrition science. I'm like, oh, I know everything. And then, I'm sorry, just came out. But then I went to USC where I'm actually learning the discipline of gerontology and how everything I learned applies to older adults, and it's different. It's very, very different. So I think talking to somebody who is a specialist in gerontology is quite helpful.
Thank you.
And Urmila asked a question. Is ginger and is turmeric with black pepper, are those good options for the immune system?
Oh, no, I'm so glad you asked that because I just talked to somebody this morning who was having problems with nausea and was very sick. And the only thing she had done in her diet that's changed was she started on a supplement for ginger with ginger and turmeric. And then when she stopped taking it, the symptoms went away. So I can't say that that supplement is going to have an effect, the same effect in everyone. Interestingly enough, that's in the blogosphere, but I don't know of any data that says it's especially good from a therapeutic point of view. You see, all of these have some basis of truth in them, but is there a clinical trial or is there a meta-analysis data that shows humans that it worked? Because I can show you a lot of stuff with lab rats, but I don't know what data there is. But now you got me going because I'm going to look up ginger and turmeric.
How does a rat know he's not nauseated?
Say that again, Bonnie?
How do we know the rat's not nauseated? He's not throwing up.
Yeah. I know that I tried tart cherry juice and I read up on it and I took whatever it was and I was so sick to my stomach that because I just took way too much and that recommendation was not right for me.
Some people take ginger for motion sickness even.
And it may help someone, and there's a very powerful placebo effect as well. Umila had raised her hand. Umila, did you have I may not have said your name right. Did you have a question for us?
Let's see. Oh, you know what? She's muted. I'm going to unmute you if I can, Urmila.
Okay.
Urmila, there you go. Okay, now you can ask.
I don't take any supplements for ginger or turmeric. I do fresh ginger every day in the morning and make water, and then I take turmeric also, the powder that comes in the store with the black pepper. I crush my black pepper and then mix it. And there's a cinnamon too, also, you know, all mixed together and then drink it.
And so I'm curious, I'm just curious why you do it. Is it because you've read that it helps boost the immune system, or do you take it because you
I don't know. That's the reason I'm asking. Is it good? Because everybody says they should try to drink turmeric, milk, and like that, you know. And then I drink ginger water every single day, no matter what.
So, you know, here's the thing. If it's something you like and enjoy, why not do it? So this is my commitment, Karen. I'm going to do a little bit more research. Give me a couple of days. I have to see what the studies show about ginger and turmeric.
Yeah.
You know, that's why I don't want to like take people's supplements away, and I don't want to say, oh my God, don't do that. If you like it, it's, you know, as long as you understand, like with this person I spoke with this morning, like she's getting sick to her stomach from these supplements. It's like, oh, maybe you don't want to take them. Or if you're taking them with another medication, that's where I always get really concerned with supplements. Yeah. All right. So Karen, I know we're just about out of time. We're at 1:02. Are there any final questions?
No. Good. Everything's good.
All right. I'll turn it back to you then, Karen.
All right. Well, thank you, Sally. Thank you, everyone. But Sally in particular, for all the research that you've done and just how passionate you are about understanding the immune system and really finding valid points as opposed to blogospheres, or, you know, someone was telling me, you know, you've done your research, and I, for one, appreciate that, because I feel that really tells us, okay, all of these studies have been done. Hopefully they are good studies, and they've told us this, that, and the other thing. And for me, it's really beneficial to know, you know, you can't really boost your immune system, but you can support your immune system. And of course, I love that exercise and sleep are the number 1 and 2 things that can really benefit your body, because I obviously so strongly believe in that as a personal trainer. But I think that if we can do things to take better care of ourselves, that's the best thing that we can do for ourselves. And you're telling us we can. So thank you, Sally. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Great audience.
Thank you, Karen.
Hope to join you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Great.